Hello again, it's Mrs. McDaniel. It is April 27th, and I'm going to be reading you the Mexican legend, Popocatepetl and Iztaccihuatl. Those names are kind of hard to say, so I'll do my best. I'm only going to read half of it. I'm going to do it in two parts. So here's the first part. Before the Spaniards came to Mexico and marched on the Aztec capital of Tenochtitlan, there were two volcanoes to the southwest of that city. The Spaniards destroyed much of Tenochtitlan and built another city in its place and called it Mexico City. It is known by that name still, and the pass through which the Spaniards came to ancient Tenochtitlan is still there, as are the volcanoes on each side of that pass. Their names have not been changed. The one to the north is Iztaccihuatl, and the one on the south of the pass is Popocatepetl. Both are snow-capped and beautiful, Popocatepetl being the taller of the two. That name means smoking mountain. In Aztec days it gushed forth smoke, and on occasion it does so still. It erupted too in Aztec days, and has done so again since the Spaniards came. Iztaccihuatl means the white woman, for its peak was and still is white. Perhaps Iztaccihuatl and Popocatepetl were in the highest part of the valley of Mexico in the days when the earth was very young, in the days when the new people were just learning to eat and grow corn. The Aztecs claimed the volcanoes as their own, for they possessed a legend about them and their creation, and they believed that legend to be true. There was once an Aztec emperor in Tenochtitlan. He was very powerful. Some thought he was wise as well, whilst others doubted his wisdom. He was both a ruler and a warrior, and he kept at bay those tribes living in and beyond the mountains surrounding the Valley of Mexico, with its huge lake called Texcoco, in which Tenochtitlan was built. His power was absolute, and the splendor in which he lived was very great. It is not known for how many years the emperor ruled in Tenochtitlan, but it is known that he lived to a great age. However, it was not until he was in the middle years that his wife gave him an heir, a girl. The emperor and empress loved the princess very much, and she was their only child. She was a dutiful daughter, and learned all that she could from her father about the art of ruling. For she knew that when he died, she would reign in his stead in Tenochtitlan. Her name was Iztaccihuatl. Her parents and her friends called her Ixtla. She had a pleasant disposition, and as a result, she had many friends. The great palace where she lived with the emperor and empress rang with their laughter when they came to the parties her parents threw for her. She was as well as being a dutiful companion, Ixtla was also very pretty, even beautiful. Her childhood was happy, and she was content enough when she became a young woman. But by then, she was fully aware of the great responsibilities which would be hers when her father died, and she became serious and studious and did not enjoy parties as much as she had done when she was younger. Another reason for her being so serious was that she was in love. This in itself was a joyous thing, but the emperor forbade her to marry. He wanted her to reign and rule alone when he died, for he trusted no one, not even his wife, to rule as he did, except his much-beloved only child, Ixtla. This was why there were some who doubted the wisdom of the emperor, for by not allowing his heirs to marry, he showed a selfishness and short-sightedness towards his daughter and his empire, which many considered was not truly wise. An emperor, they felt, who was not truly wise, could not also be truly great, or even truly powerful. The man with whom Ixtla was in love was also in love with her. Had been allowed to marry, their state could be doubly joyous. His name was Popocatepetl, and Ixtla and his friends all called him Popo. He was a warrior in the service of the emperor, tall and strong, with a capacity for gentleness and very brave. He and Ixtla loved each other very much, and while they were content and even happy when they were together, true joy was not theirs, because the emperor continued to insist that Ixtla should not marry when the time came for her to take on her father's responsibilities. This unfortunate but moderately happy relationship between Ixtla and Popo continued for several years, the couple pleading with the emperor on regular intervals and the emperor remaining constantly adamant. Popo loved Ixtla no less for her father's stubbornness, and she loved him no less while she studied, as her father demanded she should do, the art of ruling in preparation for her reign. When the emperor became very old, he also became ill. in his feebleness, and I look over in the margins, it says that feebleness means weakness. Sometimes people become feeble when they get old. Not me, of course. He channeled all his failing energies towards instructing Ixtla in statecraft, for he was no longer able to exercise that craft himself. So it was then that his enemies, the tribes who lived in the mountains and beyond, realized that the great emperor in Tiknoktalang was no longer great, for he was only teaching his daughter to rule and not ruling himself. The tribesmen came near and near to Tiknoktalang until the city was besieged. At last the emperor realized himself that he was great no longer, and that his power was nearly gone, and that his domain was in dire peril. So he was in danger. His community, his kingdom was in danger. Warrior though he long had been, he was now too old and too ill to lead his fighting men into battle. At last he understood that until his enemies were frustrated in their efforts to enter and lay waste to Tiknoktalang, he would not only no longer be emperor, but his daughter would never be empress. Instead of appointing one of his warriors to lead the rest into battle on his behalf, he offered a bribe to all of them. Perhaps it was that his wisdom, if wisdom he had forsaken him. Or perhaps he acted from fear. Or perhaps he simply changed his mind. But the bribe he offered to whichever warrior succeeded in lifting the siege of Tiknoktalang and defeating the enemies in and around the Valley of Mexico was both the hand of his daughter and the equal right to reign and rule with her in Tiknoktalang. Furthermore, he decreed that directly he learned that his enemies had been defeated, he would instantly cease to be emperor himself. Ixtla would not have to wait until her father died to become empress, and if her father should die of his illness or old age before his enemies were vanquished, his further decreed that he who overcame the surrounding enemies should marry the princess, whether he, the emperor, lived or not. Ixtla was fearful when she heard of her father's bribe to these warriors, for the only one whom she had any wish to marry was Popo, and she wanted to marry him and only him very much indeed. The warriors, however, were glad when they heard of the decree. There was not one of them among them who would not have been glad to have the princess as his wife, and they all relished the chance of being emperor. And so the warriors went to war at their ruler's behest, and each fought trebly hard, for each was fighting not only for the safety of Tiknoktalang and the surrounding valley, but for the delightful bride and for the right to be the emperor himself. Even though the warriors fought with great skill, and even though each one exhibited a courage he had not known he possessed, the war was a long one. The emperor's enemies were firmly entrenched around Lake Texcoco and Tiknoktalang by the time the warriors were sent to war. And as battle followed battle, the final outcome was uncertain. The warriors took a variety of weapons with them: wooden clubs edged with sharp blades, and obsidian machetes, javelins which they hurled at their enemies through throwing boards, bows and arrows, slings and spears set with obsidian fragments, and lances too. Many of them carried shields woven from wicker and covered in tough hide, and most wore armor made of thick quilted cotton soaked in brine. The war was long and fierce. Most of the warriors fought together and in unison, but some fought alone. As time went on, natural leaders emerged, and of these, undoubtedly, Popo was the best. Finally, it was he, brandishing his club and shield, who led the great charge of running warriors across the valley, with their enemies fleeing before them to the safety of the coastal plains and jungles beyond the mountains. All right, I'm going to pause there and pick up with part 2 in the next video.